Hello and welcome to the Celtic Huddle podcast. I'm Mark Wilson, and today, well, a wee bit later on, we'll be joined by the Celtic legend Alan Stubbs. Alan won 2 league titles and a Scottish Cup and 2 League Cups in 5 seasons at the club. Another Hoops legend sitting across from me, Simon Donnelly, is also back in the studio, and I've missed you, Sid. It's been a couple of weeks since we've seen you. I've been in here myself. I've been in with Derek McGregor. It's not quite the same, so good to have you back. Also joined by John McGarry from the Scottish Daily Mail, and he's been close to all the major stories at Parkhead this season. So, on today's podcast, we'll discuss the Eddie Howe ultimatum. If Odsonne Edouard should play for the club again in the aftermath of the 2-0 defeat to Rangers, and they need to buy new quality fullbacks this summer. So stay with us for the next 45 minutes. Also get your comments and questions in us. We want to read out as many as we can, and of course we want to hear from you, the Celtic fans, especially after that result on Sunday. I'm delighted to say once again the podcast is now sponsored by First Star Legends Gin, First Class Transfers and Social Recluse. We thank them all for their support. So let's get right into it. Let's get to it. See, Alan Stubbs has just joined us. John McGarry, how are you doing? Also,
good, thanks, guys. Good to see you.
Hi, Mark. Okay.
Alan, keeping well?
I'm very good. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. We'll just get right into it, Alan. Now, where is Eddie Howe? Is the first topic on our agenda. And I think more and more Celtic fans are asking it. I think it's been widely known that a meeting took place between Eddie Howe and Dermot Desmond. Dom Mackay was rumoured to have been there as well. But where is he? Alan, what do you make of this situation, the Celtic managerial situation, and how long it's dragging on for?
Well, I think from Eddie Howe's point of view, he's in a really strong position because he's holding all the aces at this moment in time. And I think from Celtic's point of view is that it looks like they put all their eggs in one basket and they don't know whether they're going to get the man because he's not prepared to make a decision. And if I was Dominic Mackay, Dermot Desmond, I'd be quite nervous right now because obviously it's out there, it's public that Eddie Howe is their number one choice. And then if this doesn't happen, then the next person who comes in obviously is going to be the first question was, well, how do you feel like you weren't number one choice?
Yeah, it's a good point. Now things have maybe took a wee development with Eddie Howe. Last night he was on TV. There was comments made to him about the Tottenham job that he kind of laughed off. Sid, is that a worry that the Tottenham job has came up and Tottenham could be looking for a young upcoming manager who could build a real structure to the club? Eddie Howe's sitting there available. Is that a worry?
Aye, obviously. I think that's maybe a reason why Eddie Howe is maybe not, committed to Celtic as yet. I think there was obviously a speculation on what staff he could bring in. Which I understand. I think if you're coming to a club, you want to have your own men around you. I don't know if that was the case with Eddie, but there's obviously reasons there why he's not made a decision. And in football, things change, as we see overnight. Jose Mourinho gets sacked, and suddenly the Tottenham job's up for grabs. So I agree with Stubbs. It doesn't look good for Celtic if this doesn't, see it through and get Eddie Howe in the hot seat. I think it would look poor.
Yeah, John McGarry, what's your instincts on this one at the minute? Have we just lost John? Yeah, we've just lost John. But listen, we'll move on. We'll ask John a wee bit later if we get the connection back. But Stubbsy, is it right to allow Eddie Howe, or any manager for that, to take as much time as they want and dictate to the club when they're starting? Should Celtic not be a club that demands answers sooner?
I think so. I think it's a club the size of Celtic, Mark. I think not necessarily that they're prepared to wait. I think the club deserves a quick answer because, I don't want to be disrespectful here, but this will be the biggest challenge that Eddie Howe's ever faced. In terms of it's a huge step up for Eddie Howe as a manager. Because he's done a really good job at Bournemouth. There's no denying that. He went to Burnley and he changed things around there, but it probably wasn't as what he thought it was, and he moved back down south for family reasons. So it is a really difficult and precarious situation that Celtic find themselves in. Me personally, I don't think Eddie Howe would be a candidate for the Tottenham job. I think Tottenham will look for someone different. I wouldn't be surprised if they go for, or they try and get a real top European coach.
Yeah, John's just joined us again. John, just your instincts in that one. You know, the Tottenham job coming up, is that a danger to Celtic, or do you agree with Stubbsy that, you know, Eddie Howe wouldn't be suitable for that job, and he's still the front runner for this Celtic gig?
The one thing that Celtic have to watch out for is that the kind of word coming out of Spurs yesterday was they're looking for a very attack-minded coach, and that is one thing that Eddie Howe clearly is. However, it seems that the guy that Tottenham are going to target is Julian Nagelsmann, the RB Leipzig manager. As Alan said there, you know, a European coach who's very much on the rise. You know, and I think that would kind of fit the profile of what they're looking for. Which is not to say that the impasse, if you like, is concerning. This has been rumbling on for 3 weeks now. I'm told that both parties are fairly relaxed about the situation in terms of negotiations. Nobody's stormed off in the huff or anything like that. It's just taken a long time to get these discussions over structure and personnel over the line. But you know what? I mean, Dominic Mackay started officially at the club yesterday in his nice new blue suit, and he's you know, he doesn't take over as chief executive until July the 1st, but clearly his top priority is to ensure that a new manager is appointed sooner rather than later. And you know, you need to think that you know, by the end of next week there's got to be some, you know, concrete news on that.
Yeah, listen, I did see some of the stick in social media for Dominic Mackay.
I never noticed it. So is it a blue suit?
Yeah, a blue suit with a blue tie. You feel the guy can't win, because if he's getting picked up in that in his first day, then he's in for a whole load of trouble. But Sid, I mean, he starts yesterday. He starts kind of shadowing the club yesterday. Do you think we'll hear anything from him this coming week in regards to this situation?
I would like to think so. I'm looking at some of the comments here, and I think somebody said about, you know, as long as they get the right appointment, it doesn't matter how long it takes. I agree with that to an extent, but how long have we been talking about this, you know, for weeks?
Well, this is into the 8th week now since Neil Lennon lost his job.
And obviously the disappointment of the game at the weekend, the old season book story comes up again. Fans, you know, Stubbsy was saying there about deserved of... the fans probably deserve answers quickly, you know. But again, it needs to be the right decision.
Yeah. Well, Gaz Smith says, I wouldn't read too much into how not being asked or speaking publicly about the job, as it's the way Dermot Desmond and Celtic as a club usually go about keep it under wraps until the creases are ironed out. But I don't think anyone would probably disagree with that, but it's how long the creases are taking to iron it that's probably the problem. Now, Alan, if the worst happens, if Eddie Howe decides to go to a Tottenham, Crystal Palace, Newcastle, whoever else, is there a plan B? Who would your choice be if it wasn't to be Eddie Howe?
This is the conundrum, is that right now there's no glaringly obvious candidates that stick out for me. I think I can see where a lot of the fans are saying, you know, it's not a problem if they've not made the decision right now. But the problem is that for every day and every week goes by, Celtic are missing out on potential signing targets, whether they're free transfers. You know, they'll already be agreements in place with players now, with clubs and signing. And, you know, one of the most important, the most important people in terms of who's going to be making them decisions on the players is not at the club yet. So who's going to be behind the players? So Dominic Mackay obviously has come in and he's got a huge job. And listen, let's give the guy a chance. He's coming with a huge reputation. He's done a really good job, you know, in his previous role with the Scottish Rugby Federation. You know, but we can't hide behind the fact here. Celtic have probably got one of their biggest summers that they've had in the last 20, 30 years, because it literally is a rebuild, not just from a playing point of view, but from behind the scenes and all.
Yeah, well, that leads me on to my next question, Alan, because both you and Sid were at the club in 1997. You know, massive changes took place from the top to the bottom. Sid, is this the biggest and most important rebuild in those 24 years?
It is since then, I think.
Yeah.
I agree with Stubbsy. I think you look to the weekend as the most recent performance, and it's a huge one to begin back there that are on loan, aren't even Celtic's players. Bruni's moving on. I think the whole coaching staff will change. I think it's a huge season for the club.
Yeah.
Huge.
I mean, John, Alan makes a good point there as well in saying that even though the manager's not been named, and that may be acceptable, but there's a lot of signing targets that Celtic could potentially be missing out on, and of course, head of recruitment is heading out the door, chief exec's heading out the door. I mean, they're leaving themselves a lot to do, are they not, in terms of putting these guys in positions and then asking them to go out and sign the players that Celtic require?
Yeah, I mean, you look across the city, and in January, Rangers were already recruiting for this season. So, I mean, the recruitment really shouldn't start now. It should already be well underway. Yeah, I think there are parallels here with Man United in 2013 when Alex Ferguson stepped down as the David Gill. So there were changes throughout the club. And you could argue Man United have never really recovered from that because so much changed in such a short space of time. The rebuild job this summer is colossal. I mean, apart from, perhaps Julian, McGregor, Turnbull, Forrest, one or two others at a push, there is, it's a shell of a club. It's going to require huge turnaround in terms of players. And you're going to have to get virtually all of these signings spot on. I mean, I did a piece this morning relating it to when Martin O'Neill came in, and when Gordon Strachan came in, and when Brendan Rodgers came in. And in each of those occasions, there was a solid foundation. The club had difficulties, but with the signing of a Chris Sutton or a Shunsuke Nakamura, there was something to work with there. I don't think this new manager has got anything like the platform that those guys had, and the clock's ticking. But we're now into late April, it's hard to imagine Celtic line up at the start of next season. Anything like the finished article. I think that's the concern of supporters now.
Yeah, that's a good point that John makes, Alan. Different circumstances surrounding when Martin O'Neill and stuff came in to now. But back in '97, I mean, those were hugely different circumstances where the club had to be rebuilt. What's your memories of the club back then and what was going on behind the scenes? Much different to what state the club is at now?
I think there was a bit of turmoil, obviously going on, but I think I don't really want to say that. We had a stronger group in terms of personality, but football has changed since then in terms of personalities and characters. And one of the biggest things that Celtic have to address this summer is the character that's been one of the most successful players there in the last 14 years, and that's Scott Brown, because he was a driving influence in that dressing room, and he leaves a huge void, not just in terms of his presence on the pitch, but his presence off the pitch and all. And I think the one thing that's been labelled at Celtic this year, and I would throw in terms of character and the presence, Callum McGregor, he's always one who stepped forward, and he's been the one who will rise up to the challenge. But I think after that, you look at Turnbull's performances this season, there's been some real positives from it. But then I'm struggling. And we're talking about Celtic here now. Edouard has not looked interesting, and obviously no one can ever question his ability. But his attitudes this season, on the pitch has looked way off it. You know, when Aya wants to leave by all accounts. You know, you look at Ayeti. You know, you can keep going through the lot of them. You know, I've said it before. You can look at the whole Celtic defence and keeper, and it might be a completely new one by the time they start off for the kick-off first ball next season. You know, that in itself is alarming. You know, because these things you can't just go out and say, okay, yeah, we need a back five, we need 2 wingers, we need a striker, we need another midfield player, and throw them all in. Because all you're doing then is hoping that they can gel. You're hoping. You're not knowing. The manager's not going to have any time. The new manager that comes in needs time to bed in his ideas, his philosophy for the club going forward. And I'm afraid that's not going to take 6 weeks, which is all he's going to have potentially in pre-season to work with the players. And if anyone thinks any differently, they're deluded.
Yeah. Listen, I totally agree. Where Alan there said that it takes time to get these things right, especially the back line. But Stubbsy, you mentioned Edward there and his attitude, so let's move on to Edward and the defeat to Rangers and how he performed and how the side performed. Look, 2-0 obviously on Sunday. I think we could all admit watching it that wasn't good enough. Some of the players were shockingly bad. Their demeanour didn't look what's required to play for Celtic. Said, look, there's only 4 league games left now and the season's gone, it's done, dead rubbers. What do you think, Edward? Do you think that's him done at Celtic? Do you think he should play again? We've put a poll earlier. Should he play again in these 4 games? Is it time just to sit him on the bench for 4 games? That's his time done. Play one of the younger boys who might be there next year.
Maybe, aye. Do we have some young strikers coming through?
Well, that's another question.
I'd love to see a young striker getting a shot at it for the 4 games. We know what Griffiths can do, and I think in the Scottish Premiership, Griffiths will still score goals. Edward, for me, at the weekend, just Stubbsy touched on it, disinterested. I mean, even for the start, loose touches, balls getting played up round about him. He's one piece of magic where he has the shot against McGregor. But even the penalty sums up his whole performance for me, swaggering up to a penalty. I know we can all miss penalties, but swaggering up at an important time in the game, go and bust the net with it.
I get players that can be like that and turn it on, and it's magic, and they get away with it, and he can do that. Even though his goals return has been, what you'd expect probably from a Celtic striker, his all-round performances, it doesn't look good when it doesn't come off on Sunday.
I mean, I've seen him at Ibrox. I think one of his best games for Celtic was the game, the 3-2 game, where he led the line superbly, scores the winner. You know what he can do, but at the moment, I think the boys, he's playing within himself. Yeah, well, Alex Burrow here, Eddie should be dropped. I'd rather have a half-fit Griff pulling defences out of position. Listen, it's a big question. John, what's going to happen behind the scenes with Edward in the coming weeks? They'll obviously be interested in him. I mean, the transfer value, where does that sit with him just now? Will Celtic get a favourable price, or should they sell him for a half-cut price? That they would have got much more last year.
I think despite his performance at the weekend, there's no doubt in the guy's class and ability. I mean, that's beyond dispute, and there are enough clubs interested in him that I think Celtic will still get a reasonable fee, probably something north of £20 million, I think, which would allow them to, obviously they outlaid about half of that to PSG when he signed. I think there's still quite a sell-on clause. It wouldn't leave an enormous profit, but it would still allow them to consider it to be a good deal over the piece. From what I'm told, I think Leicester are still the keenest of all the clubs. Roma are well in the mix as well. There's a number of German and English teams who are interested in him, but I think Leicester, with the obvious connection to Rodgers, would be the kind of favoured destination at the moment, and that's going to be, another thing that Dominic Mackay is going to have to address. It's kind of assumed that he will move on. It's a matter of kind of making that official and then going out and ensuring that the best possible fee can be realised as quickly as possible as well, because Celtic could, there's a chance Griffiths could leave, Ajeti, will be there. You'd imagine Klamala's going. There's a real lack of strikers at the club.
Yeah, well, that's what Sid was just touching on there. Even racking your brains for a young boy coming through. Now, when Sid and Stubbsy were in the side, those young boys came through and made a name for themselves. Even when I played against Celtic, and then when I got there were young strikers coming through who broke in and did the job. Just now, I'm scratching my head. Who could come in and you would go, yeah, give this boy a chance, give him 6 games, and he could be the guy. So Celtic will have to invest, and John's right. The money that they get from Edward is going to probably come in and then go straight out the door on that same position. So they need to get that right. But Francie Dub LU tweets in, Eddie checked out ages ago. Dropping him now is the correct thing to do. Won't make any difference to the fee we get for him. So the live poll I just mentioned there, should Edward play for Celtic again? He's voted 38% say yes, 62% said say no. Look, wages on. Alan, what do the English Premier League clubs think of Edward? Did they see more in his international performances than he would get credit for playing in Scotland? Would they be willing, do you think, to pay upwards of 20 million?
Yeah, I think we've seen enough over the past few seasons to realise what a good player Edward is on his day. And add into the mix of that whichever club, if he goes to the Premiership, just say for instance it is Leicester, he is going to be playing with a higher calibre of players. There's no doubt about that. So therefore, that as a player can raise you onto the next level. But what we've seen is this saga just drag on from the summer, because this was public that Edward wanted to leave. He had a verbal agreement, whatever these verbal agreements are, that he would be allowed to go if a club paid or offered X amount of money, and then obviously he's not been happy with that, because he feels like the club have gone back on what was spoken, whatever it was that was said, and you can tell, and you can sometimes, as you've just spoken before, Mark, and said we've played with players who sometimes can not look interested, but then they turn it on in a flash and you see it. But Edward has just looked at times not interested whatsoever. It looked like it's been a damage limitation for him this season to not get injured.
Yeah, Stubbs, do you think that's a problem though with the structure of Celtic? Now we know it's worked incredibly well over the years, bringing players in from the continent and trying to sell the fact that they're a stepping stone really to the English Premier League, but when it gets down to the last couple of years of their contract and maybe Celtic aren't quite ready to let them go yet, the player takes a huff, and it's easy to see how things like this can happen. A star striker, a star midfielder can quickly rip the squad apart. We've seen flashes here with Dembele and Brendan Rodgers, how that escalated really quickly. And Cham was another one who had his head turned, and then it wasn't quite right after that. Edward again. It all comes from probably the structure. We'll bring these young guys in, come to us for a couple of years, and we'll give you our word, we'll let you go. Is it time for that to be put to one side, or should Celtic continue in that vein?
Mark, what I think when you look at this season, and Sid will know this from our time with there, is that when we stopped Rangers doing 10 in a row, Rangers were better than us as a squad. There was no doubt about that. They had some brilliant players, but what we made up for, we had a brilliant dressing room. We had a group of guys who were obviously had ability, but we had a group of players and all who would run through a brick wall for each other. And if someone wasn't doing it, we'll tell them, and then it was forgotten about straight away. I think the mentality of players now, if something is said to someone, it almost becomes personal, as if why are you saying something to me? And I think that's been evident, and it's so evident to see on the pitch. You look at Rangers right now, and for me, yes, they've been the best team. There's no doubt about that this season, but then they're not miles ahead of Celtic in terms of ability, man to man on the pitch. But what they are ahead of Celtic are, as in a team that looks together. Whereas Celtic look like individuals. they look like there's cliques in the squad where there's little groups who want to stick together, and that just does not work. As if you're trying to win something as a club, individuals will very rarely win you the trophies. It's what you do as a group and as a team and as a collective unit that win you trophies. Because it's a long season, and one or two individuals can't do it consistently over a season. It's a group of players or a squad of players that win you titles, and that's what Celtic have lacked massively this season.
Totally right, couldn't agree more. Brown Warrior here, a few comments coming in down the side as well. A better unit, I suppose he's talking about Rangers, but not better individuals. Sid, agree with that?
100%. We spoke about it before we came on live. I think looking at that game at the weekend, Rangers as a collective unit defend well. Celtic look as if, particularly on Sunday, they look as if they're just concerned in their own wee bit. The full-backs for me look lost at the weekend, but there's no team ethic there. There's no togetherness.
Yeah.
And as Stubbs touches on there, you need that through a season, and I think that's been evident this season at Celtic. That whether it's, I don't know, the boy Kenny looked nervous at the weekend.
Well,
Big Shane
listen,
Duffy coming in, looked a nervous wreck. There's just no togetherness there with Celtic this season.
Yeah, well, that brings us on to the full-backs. I'm glad you mentioned it rather than me, because I was watching the game at the weekend in amazement, and I don't like just to come on and give people stick for the sake of it, but it was alarming for me watching the both Celtic fullbacks. And listen, Diego Laxalt's probably a lovely guy, so is John Joe Kenny, but their performances since they've came to the club, I think, have been way short of what's required, and I think Sunday was just the absolute peak of it. Like Celtic have always been famed for having good fullbacks, and it's such an important part of how Celtic have played. You guys played with, Tom Boyd would have been there, Jackie McNamara, Tosh McKinley. Then you go through the years, Didi Hagat, and then even Lee Naylor, who I think did Lee Naylor won Player of the Year. Then you had great servants like Lustig, Tierney, who goes for 25 million. But the recruitment in that area over the years, I think, has hurt Celtic dramatically. Now, you could throw Frimpong in there, and he was a young player plucked from an academy, and Celtic sold him for close to, 11 million quid. That's a success. But too many have fell by the wayside. El Hamid looked a good prospect, again fell by the wayside, and you could go back through the years. Tierney's been an outstanding one, Ezagiri's been an outstanding one. Apart from that, there has been many failures. And just Laxalt and Kenny at the weekend just summed up everything for me what Celtic have been this season. Scared to express themselves. I thought that every time Kenny got the ball on Sunday, he looked to pass it back to his centre half for some reason, even if he had 20 yards of space to move into. I thought Laxalt was caught out of position so many times in 45 minutes that I couldn't believe what I was watching. But it wasn't just that, because I think we all know as players that can happen. It was his desire to get back into position that I could not believe what I was seeing. For the first goal, the camera pans round behind the goal. You see him jogging back and allowed El Yunusi to do the dirty work. For the second goal, Aribo goes by him twice, and he still has a chance to get back to Aribo before Aribo crosses the ball, and you can just see the moment he gives up on it. Yeah. And I don't think you can have players like that at the club and expect to go forward. I mean, Robbie Smith, why play Laxalt when Taylor had a good game the week before? John, I mean, that begs the question. Taylor dropped Laxalt in. John Kennedy obviously sees something in him. Is there a realistic possibility that he could be there, that Celtic could pay for him to come permanent next year?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I just found the whole setup just so perplexing. I mean, if you're going to go with a diamond formation, you're so reliant on your fullbacks, and there was nothing to suggest that these guys were going to do what was required of them, which was bomb up and down the line all day and defend as well as attack. And probably apart from the goalkeeping situation, this has been the one area of the team that's been really neglected in the last couple of years. We go back 2 years ago, you had Kieran Tierney and Mikael Lustig. Now, Looks like, personally, I thought Celtic were right to let him go. I thought his best days were behind him. Tierney, 25 million for an academy player. You know, the time had come for him to move on as well. But what happens next is Celtic then sign El Hamed, Moritz Bauer, and Frimpong on the right, and their efforts on the left have been Bolingoli, Johnny Hayes, and Greg Taylor. Now, I've got a certain amount of sympathy for the right-hand side because Frimpong was a success. And as you said, Mark, they get sensational money for him in January, and you've got to accept that. And then you're looking at having to bring in a lone player who's, I don't think, is up to the task. But on the left-hand side, Bolingoli, putting aside his COVID disgrace, £3 million for him was just not remotely going to fill the gap left by Tierney. And you're never going to replace Tierney. Let's be clear about that. But you've got to at least attempt to get a player of some kind of calibre. Johnny Hayes did a turn for Celtic, and I think you could argue about the wisdom of letting him go. He had some good games. Greg Taylor, I think, is the best fullback at the club. Certainly defensively, I think he's got a wee bit to go in the final third. And he's somebody that I think you could maybe look to develop. But to me, it's been the fullbacks have been the area of the team which have summed up this kind of bizarre transfer policy that we've seen the last few years, which is basically has brought the club to this real moment of crisis.
Yeah, Alan, it's more alarming when you see guys like James Forrest and Mikey Johnson out and out wingers, and you're without them. So the modern game, we know relies on fullbacks heavily for your width, and Celtic are missing that. But you look at the other side of the city and how Rangers have depended on fullbacks. Tavernier and Barisic have been absolutely outstanding. The amount of ammunition they supply for Roof and Morelos, incredible. I mean, how important is fullbacks in the modern game? You as a manager, do you put much emphasis in getting that right when you go into a side?
I think it's huge, but I think obviously when you're going to play a diamond, it puts even more emphasis on your fullbacks getting forwards because you can be so narrow in midfield, and obviously if them forwards, are not getting forward or they've not got a connection. Forrest and Mikey Johnson being out has been a huge loss, because the balance of the team has not looked right all season. And for me, yes, you can have a good right back, but it's so important to have someone in front of him and all that you can trust. As a fullback, the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to be getting forward knowing that you haven't got any cover behind you, and it starts to put doubts in your mind. And that's what creeps in, is that you get to a point where it's like when you're in a winger who's putting crosses in, and he knows that the crosses are going in and no one's ever going to win them. You stop putting crosses in and you look for different alternatives. And it's the same with fullbacks. And I'm not saying this is an excuse for Sunday or whatever, but I think it's probably over the season. If you keep trying to go forward and then you lose the ball and you're having to run another 60 yards to get back, you'd end up getting fed up saying, well, you know what, I can't do this all game. I'm not going to. And you start to pick and choose when you can go forward. But I'd have to say, it's not just the one area that's been the biggest concern. You look at Celtic defensively in the middle as the centre half this season, how many goals they've conceded from set plays. It's. I think it's harsh just to look at the fullbacks. Obviously there's been a reason for the wide areas with McGregor and Forrest being out. But there's been. It's not just been the one area. We could be on this show talking for a couple of hours about Celtic's inefficiencies this season. Yes, it's a talking point from the weekends, but to just highlight that would to be honest, would be letting a few others off the hook.
Yeah. Listen, Stubbs is right. I mean, it's been a accumulation of probably every position at some stage that we've been on this podcast chatting about. And I mean, we're chatting about the fullbacks this week just because it was highlighted so much. And John Kennedy obviously realised 45 minutes into the game that he'd made a mistake. But in terms of that position, Sid, how easy is it going to be to find fullbacks? It's not going to be an easy
No,
job
well,
to fill two positions, is it?
You've listed a few guys there going back to my time with Tosh and Jackie and Boydie, and then the likes of Tierney and Lustig. Celtic have, been blessed with really good fullbacks over.
But how good was it for you as a striker, knowing that when you made a run in the box, or a right midfielder, knowing you were getting the ball?
I watched a bit on Twitter last night with Tosh flying down that left-hand side, and I think I put up a king of assists. He must have made a bundle of goals for Celtic in his time there, just delivering balls in for a Van Hooijdonk or whoever in the middle. But up and down all day, McNamara was the same on the right, Boydie. And then you look at the recent times with Tierney coming through, Celtic have most of the ball in most of their games, especially domestically. Attacking fullbacks is almost a signature, that's related to Celtic. So it's been a huge miss. But again, going back to Forrest, we've spoke about Forrest many times in this show. He's been a huge miss this year as well, and that was my one worry when I looked at the team on Sunday and he wasn't on it.
Yeah.
Because I think the team had been lifted in the 2 or 3 games that he'd been back. And I didn't see the injury last week. I thought it was hopefully going to be a precautionary thing to take him off. Obviously, he was struggling.
I was a worry. I was just surprised that John had changed the full setup after Livy, reverting back to the diamond. But There you go. It was a big decision to make with Forrest at the team. Stephen McKeown here. What Mark says is all true, not just for the fullbacks, but for most of the pitch. That was what Alan says. The attitude or lack of attitude must come from the dressing room and the mood in the camp. Too many players not caring and not trying for each other, never mind the club. I always think that is the situation when you get too many loan players. And I always think there's an understanding that they're going back to their club and I'm all right, Jack. Whatever happens next year, it doesn't affect me. I've been in the dressing rooms. I won't name names, but I've been in there with boys like that.
Opportunity. You're getting into the champions then to beat them and put them out potentially the Scottish Cup. It's a great one to kick-start something for Celtic, and it just was a damp whimper. Yeah,
disappointing. Right, guys, we couldn't finish it off without getting our comments on the big news this week. Doesn't really concern Celtic at the minute, but it might. You never know. European Super League. Alan, we saw last night the Everton Liverpool fans come together, stating their opinion on it. What's your feelings on this European Super League?
First of all, I think I was totally taken aback from it, and the more that you read about it, the more disgusting it comes across to the, for me as a kid growing up, it was all about.
Oh, you just froze there, Alan. We've just lost you there a bit. Yeah, start that point again. It sounded fascinating. You as a kid.
Yeah. I was. You tune in on a in the summer, and you're watching the World Cups. You're watching the European Championships. You look at Celtics, obviously when they won their European Championship, and then suddenly, these so-called Big Six in England, which I would say there's a big two. I'm not too sure of the rest. Liverpool and United, I would say are the big two. Talking about this breakaway league, I'm just to be honest, I'm shocked. I'm a bit speechless, and I thought Gary Neville was absolutely brilliant in the way he described it. It's just a real selfish foreign owners who are looking to try and make as much money as they possibly can. And you see what's gone on in recent times with the pandemic. And these clubs have been working away behind the scenes, just thinking about lining the pockets, and I really do think this is a chance for the players to stand up, and see what their objectives are and models are, because I think UEFA would be in their rights to say to them, if the players decide to go this way, then they will be banned from playing in World Cups representing the country. And to see what's more important, because you see a lot of players all saying, representing my country is the biggest thing I've ever done. well, let's see whether it is the biggest, and rather than just trying to line the pockets.
Yeah, John, what do you think of that? I mean, in terms of players, I think we all would like to think that the players would stand up and say, listen, we're taking no part in this, but they've still got contracts. How hard is that going to get out of for them, when their owners are saying, no, you're coming to play in this league? How do you go about that?
Well, I think at the moment, when everyone is getting their lawyers to pour over things, the one thing is that the players, in terms of the English club, are contracted to play in the EPL. They're not contracted to play in this European Super League.
Ah, right, okay, yeah.
That's one thing, but I just find the whole makeup of it just dripping with arrogance and self-entitlement. I mean, there's Tottenham, who last won the title in 1962. Now, in that time, Alan's team Everton have won it twice. Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, Leicester. I can go on and on and on, right? Tottenham just think we're one of the big six. No, you're not. Try winning something first of all. The whole thing. It's I mean the deceit of these clubs, in particular, when they were given assurances that they were behind the reformed Champions League. And basically just described as snakes this morning. I think that was being too kind to Ed Woodward, frankly. And the way they've behaved here. The worrying thing is, and I think this is the real crucial point, and it's fine people kind of uniting behind this and wanting to rail against it. And season ticket holders from the Stretford end to Goodison and all that are obviously uniting here. The problem is that these venture capitalists who own these clubs, they don't care about these supporters. They actually refer to them as legacy fans. To them, it's not supporters. Their consumers are on Instagram and Facebook in China. That's who's going to finance it. They don't care about fans who have, from 4-year-old who stood in the terrace at Highbury or whatever. That's the real worrying thing, is that the traditions of these clubs, the history of it, the history of the English game going back, over a century and a half, is a total irrelevance to them, And you know what? You can kind of understand it to a certain extent with some of the Americans, because they know sport that has no relegation. Ed Woodward, as an Englishman, he understands it. Perez of Real Madrid has been president of our club, who's won more European Cups than anybody else. These people know exactly what they're doing. They know exactly what these clubs and what football means to people. The whole thing is...
Perez says this morning that he was doing it to save football. Can you believe that?
But Perez also said last night that games are too long and the attention span of kids nowadays. That's what he came out with last night. He was talking about games being too long.
See, that's the worry. When people are in charge of your game, it's got to go to pot. Mark O'Brien here. As much as we moan about about Celtic and the board, we still have our identity and club. No franchises and no name changes. That's an important part. That's what football's all about, no matter who you support. Guys, well, what do you think, Alan? Do you think it will happen? Just to finish it off.
I think money always talks, and unfortunately, I think there's still arms and legs in it. I really hope it doesn't, because it's basically is selling the soul of football.
Yeah, John, what's your overriding opinion? You think this will go over the line? That will happen?
It'll come down to how strong UEFA and FIFA are prepared to act. If UEFA are serious about it, they should kick these clubs out of the competitions now, and the English Premier League should threaten to expel them. I hate to say it, because I know the players have got nothing to do with this, but if I was UEFA and FIFA, I would carry through in the sanction to ban them from playing for international teams. I think you've got to take the strongest possible measures, or else it will go ahead, I think.
Yeah. Sid, opinion? I think it'll go ahead?
I hope not.
Yeah.
I think there's enough opposition. I know Stubbs is saying money talks, but I think there's enough opposition there for it not to be seen through.
Yeah, everybody has to be singing through the same hymn sheet in this one, don't they, to stop it. Guys, just finally, Stubbsy, before we let you go, away to Aberdeen tomorrow, bite of dead rubber, but predictions, should Celtic give some of the young boys a chance, or the ones who haven't played so much, and score prediction?
I'm going to go 2-1 Celtic, and I think He should give the ones to set a statement. But in another breath, sorry, I'd rather, probably lean towards say, well, you know what?
Oh, I just froze right at the end. There's going to be an absolute belter of a point there as well, Stubbsy. We just missed you. You would rather what? You'd rather finish with a strong team?
I'd rather say to the players that let themselves down the weekends, right? Here you go. Let's see how much it really means to you. Whether you are really bothered, because you always get another chance to act in football. Let's see Celtic finish the season with some sort of response from the players that unfortunately haven't responded enough this season.
Yeah, good point. Brilliant, Alan. We'll let you go. Thanks very much for joining us, giving you your time and good points a day. All the best, Stubbsy. John, just before we let you go, what do you think tomorrow night? Celtic mix their team up or go like Stubbsy says, same guys, go and make amends?
I would give Lacey Griffiths a shot. I mean, one of these not had has been a run of games. I think he deserves maybe the next 4 games to see if he can do something. I think the game probably means more to Aberdeen, given they're still trying to go for 3rd place. I think it's going to maybe get a 1 each draw written all over it.
Yeah. Okay, John, thanks very much for joining us again. Hopefully speak to you in the next couple of weeks. Cheers, mate. Thank you. Sid, predictions tomorrow night? I know it's not important. It's a tough one. Aberdeen, new manager.
Aberdeen, yeah, everything's fresh for them. I'll go 1-0 Celtic.
1-0 Celtic, yeah. I think Celtic will win. I think they should mix up. I think Taylor should come in. I think Griffiths should probably get a game the last 4 games to see if he can finish in a high, and a few other changes I wouldn't mind seeing as well. But that's us for this week, guys. I'd like to thank everybody for getting your comments in, some good ones in there, and thanks once again to our sponsors, First Star Legends Gin, Social Recluse and First Class Transfers. We'll be back again next week.